The crystal glasses clinked, the turkey sat perfectly carved, and the room was bathed in the warm, artificial glow of family unity. Then, Linda stood up. She pointed a manicured finger directly across the mahogany table at me. "Maya has been lying to this family for years," she announced. Her voice didn't waver. It was a calculated strike. The dining room froze. Forks stopped in midair. I was the target. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted in front of your entire family? Drop a comment and let me know how you handled it. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, with the weight of Linda's accusation. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I didn't even drop my gaze. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, constantly paying the emotional premium just to keep the peace. But this wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet, and it was finally time to settle the accounts. Linda stood there, radiating the triumphant energy of a prosecutor who had just delivered the final, fatal blow to a hostile witness. She opened her mouth to continue her calculated tirade, preparing to list my supposed sins to the captive audience of aunts, uncles, and cousins who hung on her every word. Before she could utter another syllable, a chair scraped sharply against the hardwood floor. It was Nathan. My husband didn't rush to my defense with panicked shouts or emotional pleas. His face was entirely devoid of emotion. He looked at his mother not with anger, but with the cold, diagnostic detachment of a technician isolating a faulty machine. He walked slowly, deliberately, away from the table and toward the smart home control panel mounted on the far wall. The relatives watched him in a state of suspended animation, confused by this sudden deviation from the expected script. Usually, this was the part where the accused broke down in tears, and the family rallied around the matriarch to enforce her dominance. Not tonight. Nathan tapped the screen twice. The heavy velvet curtains covering the massive living room window slid shut with a smooth, mechanical hum. A projector screen descended quietly from the ceiling recess. He pulled up the estate's integrated home theater system. Linda scoffed, crossing her arms in a defensive posture. She demanded to know if this was a distraction from the serious family discussion she was trying to lead. Nathan didn't offer a reply. He bypassed the entertainment library entirely and accessed a hidden, highly encrypted directory. It was a secret security feed, a system we had quietly installed months ago when my business assets began showing inexplicable discrepancies. He selected a specific file and hit play. The high-definition screen flickered to life, casting a stark, bluish glow over the extravagant Thanksgiving feast. The video feed was crisp, the audio crystal clear. It showed the interior of my private home office. And there, in the center of the frame, was Linda, rifling through my locked filing cabinet with a master key she was never supposed to possess. The collective intake of breath around the table was deafening. The narrative had shifted in an instant. They weren't shocked by what they'd done, they were shocked that I'd stopped playing along. The transaction was over. The footage played in relentless high definition on the massive screen. There was Linda, her designer silk scarf slipping off her shoulder as she bypassed my security drawer with practiced ease. She wasn't just casually browsing, she was systematically photographing my confidential client contracts and internal financial ledgers. As the video rolled, the bewildering backstory of my marriage finally made perfect, logical sense. For 3 years, I had been dealing with missing documents, losing highly lucrative bids on interior design projects, and managing inexplicable friction with my most reliable suppliers. Then came the ultimate discrepancy: $25,000, quietly siphoned from our joint marital funds. I used to think I was simply losing my mind, overwhelmed by the stress of scaling a business, but watching the screen, I recognized the true architecture of gaslighting. It is never a sudden, violent explosion. It is a slow, methodical demolition of your reality. Linda had mastered the stages with terrifying precision. First came the isolation. She would casually mention to Nathan how stressed I seemed, how forgetful I was becoming, subtly planting the insidious idea that I was unreliable and mentally fragile. Then came the distortion of facts. When I brought up the missing money months ago, she laughed it off with a condescending smile. suggesting I had probably mismanaged my own business accounts and was simply too proud to admit my failure. Finally, she executed the role reversal. She positioned herself as the concerned, worried mother-in-law, checking my office only to help clean up my supposed messes. This is the exact blueprint of a manipulator. They break your foundation, hide the hammer, and then generously offer you a hand to stand back up. Watching her on screen, meticulously covering her tracks, the confusion evaporated into pure, cold logic. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. I had spent years doubting my own professional competence, reviewing my spreadsheets late into the night, wondering where the $25,000 had vanished. I had blamed my own accounting, but it wasn't an error on my ledger. It was an embezzlement operating from inside my own home. The video showed her transferring funds using a cloned authentication token. Every deliberate click of her mouse echoed through the dining room speakers, dismantling her grand illusion piece by piece. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a hostile takeover. The family watched, completely paralyzed, as the matriarch they feared and revered was reduced to a petty, calculating thief caught on a digital security feed. The entire power dynamic of the room inverted in real time, shifting the leverage entirely into our hands. The screen faded to black, leaving the dining room bathed in an awkward, suffocating silence. The proof was irrefutable. I wasn't draining funds, Linda was. The matriarch's face flushed a deep, mottled crimson, but her pride refused to let her surrender the floor. She stood taller, attempting to reclaim her shattered authority through sheer force of will. She snapped that this was a gross violation of her privacy, claiming her voice was shrill and desperate. She insisted she was merely securing family assets, doing Nathan a favor because I was clearly financially unstable and a risk to their legacy. She looked around the long mahogany table, waiting for the familiar, comforting chorus of agreement from her siblings and nieces. But the chorus was dead silent. The relatives, who had nodded eagerly just minutes ago when I was the targeted victim, suddenly found their sweet potatoes endlessly fascinating. They began to physically shift in their chairs, subtly leaning away from Linda's end of the table. This is the inescapable trap of bystander complicity. In deeply toxic family systems, enablers don't participate out of genuine loyalty. They participate out of calculated self-preservation. They side with the dominant aggressor because it guarantees they won't become the next target of the abuse. For years, they had tolerated Linda's casual cruelty toward me, laughing nervously at her passive-aggressive jokes and quietly validating her lies. They were compliant, silent shareholders in her monopoly of control. But bystanders only support the villain as long as the villain maintains absolute power. The exact moment the power structure is fundamentally threatened, the enablers scatter to protect their own interests. They realized the cost of backing Linda had just skyrocketed, from participating in harmless family gossip to actively covering up a documented financial crime. No one wanted their name on this particular balance sheet. I finally spoke, my voice completely steady, utterly devoid of the emotional tremor she so desperately wanted to hear. I asked her how stealing $25,000 equated to securing assets. I told her it was not a family favor, but grand larceny. She sneered, pointing a shaking finger at the blank projector screen, claiming I couldn't prove where the money went and that a video proved nothing. She insisted it was a private family matter to be handled internally. She was still operating under the pathetic delusion that family ties were a magical shield against legal liability. She thought biology functioned as a non-disclosure agreement, but I had stopped reading from her script. I didn't view her as a mother-in-law anymore. I viewed her as a severe liability that needed to be aggressively liquidated. Nathan moved his hand back to the smart home control panel. He hadn't said a single word since he stood up, and his absolute silence was far more devastating than any screaming match could ever be. With a few swift, deliberate keystrokes, he bypassed the video feed application and pulled up a massive split-screen display. On the left side of the screen were the highly encrypted network security logs pulled directly from our home router. On the right side were the bank's official digital transaction timestamps. It was no longer a messy family drama playing out over a turkey dinner. It was a rigorous forensic investigation, broadcast live in the center of the living room. Nathan systematically layered the data for the audience. He stated the dates in a flat, unyielding monotone. He read off the exact times the local network traffic showed a device labeled with Linda's name accessing my private business portal. He cross-referenced those login times with the exact moments wire transfers were initiated. He tapped the screen, drawing a digital line connecting the internet protocol address in my office to the corresponding bank confirmation numbers. $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. Linda's face completely drained of color, turning a sickly, ashen gray. Her hands, previously planted firmly on her hips in stubborn defiance, now trembled slightly by her sides. She opened her mouth, perhaps to formulate another desperate lie, but the sheer, crushing weight of the data destroyed her narrative before it could even form. She whispered an accusation, asking if he had tapped her phone, staring at her own son as if he were a complete stranger. Nathan corrected her coldly, stating he had simply secured his own network. The timestamps matched the exact moments she was visible on the security camera footage. The server logs confirmed it was her specific device authenticating the fraudulent transfers. She couldn't claim ignorance, and she couldn't gaslight a server log. The digital audit was absolute and unforgiving. I watched her carefully constructed, decades-long reality crumble under the weight of undeniable, verifiable data. For her entire adult life, she had weaponized emotions to control this family. But raw data has no emotion. It cannot be guilt-tripped, it cannot be manipulated by tears, and it does not respect familial hierarchy. The transaction was fully transparent now. Every unauthorized transfer, every deleted email, every intercepted client contract was laid bare for the entire room to analyze. The relatives sat completely paralyzed, the silence broken only by the low hum of the projector and Nathan's steady, rhythmic recitation of facts. We had stripped away the elaborate illusion of the caring, protective mother-in-law and exposed the cold, calculating thief hiding underneath. But the audit wasn't finished. Nathan had one more file to open, and this one wasn't just about stolen money. Nathan's finger hovered over a heavily encrypted folder labeled simply as the archive. He clicked it, expanding a dense directory of compressed audio files. He turned to face his mother fully for the first time, his expression completely blank. He told her the financial theft was just the operational budget, but this folder contained her actual business plan. He clicked on an audio recording dated exactly 6 months prior. The sound of Linda's voice, crisp, arrogant, and highly conspiratorial, echoed through the quiet room. She was on a phone call. The recorded Linda was issuing clear instructions to draft the transfer of my limited liability company. She boldly claimed Nathan wouldn't contest the action once the divorce was officially filed. She stated my signature was already on the documents, bragging that she had traced it herself from an old passport application. She ordered the person on the other end of the line to just process the deed. The room seemed to plunge into an icy, breathable vacuum. Stealing $25,000 was a serious crime, but what we were listening to was something far more sinister and destructive. It was a premeditated, highly organized strategy to dissolve our marriage and systematically strip me of my life's work. Linda wasn't just a petty thief skimming from a joint account. She was a felon who forged legal documents to steal my interior design business right out from under me. This was the prenuptial dissolution she had meticulously orchestrated entirely behind our backs. She had been quietly setting up a complex legal framework to ensure that when she finally succeeded in driving a wedge between Nathan and me, I would leave the marriage with absolutely nothing to my name. The cold retaliation was nearly complete. My anger had long since crystallized into something hard, sharp, and highly weaponized. I didn't feel betrayed, because betrayal implies a prior state of genuine trust. Now, I clearly realized her affection had always been a subscription service, with me completely footing the bill. I stepped away from the table and walked slowly toward her, my voice quiet, steady, and terrifyingly calm. I stated the facts to her face. I told her she forged my signature on corporate transfer documents and attempted to fraudulently acquire a business valued at over $500,000. Linda backed away, stumbling slightly against a heavy dining chair. The towering arrogance had entirely evaporated, replaced by a raw, unadulterated panic. She looked wildly at her relatives, her eyes begging for someone, anyone, to intervene and save her. But they were statues, frozen in their own desperate self-preservation. They instantly recognized that the line had been crossed from a bitter family dispute to a massive federal offense. Nathan closed the laptop on the control panel with a sharp, decisive snap. He spoke quietly, informing his mother that he didn't just audit the network. He had forwarded the entire comprehensive dossier, including the forged corporate documents and the clear audio confessions, directly to the district attorney's office earlier that morning. Right on cue, the heavy brass knocker on our front door sounded. It wasn't a tentative, polite tap. It was the sharp, uncompromising, and authoritative knock of law enforcement. Nathan walked slowly to the foyer and opened the door without hesitation, stepping aside to let two fully uniformed officers step into the house. The flashing red and blue lights from their parked cruisers cast erratic, shifting shadows across the manicured front lawn, clearly visible through the now open door. The lead officer stepped into the dining room and firmly asked for Linda. Linda didn't speak a single word. She just stared at the officers, then looked at Nathan, and finally, her eyes locked onto me. Her sprawling empire of emotional manipulation and financial control had entirely collapsed in a matter of minutes. As the officers calmly read her rights and placed her in handcuffs, there was no dramatic screaming, no frantic resisting, and absolutely no desperate apologies. There was just the cold, mechanical click of the heavy metal locking securely around her wrists. She was escorted out of the house, the front door shutting firmly behind her with a final, echoing thud. The relatives didn't stay for dessert or coffee. They collected their coats in a hushed, terrified silence, completely avoiding my gaze entirely as they quickly shuffled out into the cold November night. Soon, the large house was entirely empty, save for Nathan and me. We sat down together in the living room, the projector screen still humming quietly above us in the dim light. The silence that settled over our home wasn't heavy, awkward, or oppressive. It was the clean, sterile, and deeply peaceful silence of a space that had finally been thoroughly disinfected. I looked over at Nathan. He reached out and gently took my hand. There was no need for grand, sweeping declarations or tearful, exhausting embraces. We had successfully acted as a unified front, executing a flawless and necessary termination of a highly toxic contract. I've come to realize that forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the only way to set yourself free from the poison they leave behind. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and it certainly doesn't mean amnesia. Sometimes the most profound and necessary act of self-love is simply closing the account and walking away for good. Family is so often treated as an unbreakable, sacred bond, a mandatory obligation that must be endured at all costs, regardless of the damage. But biology is not a free license for abuse. We are taught to endure, to keep the peace, and to sacrifice our own sanity just for the sake of harmony at the holiday table. But tonight, I learned that true peace doesn't come from remaining silent and compliant. It comes from standing absolute in your own truth, armed with impenetrable boundaries that simply cannot be breached. The $25,000 will be fully recovered. The business will remain entirely mine, and the toxic shadow that loomed over our marriage has been permanently and legally evicted. We didn't just survive the Thanksgiving dinner. We rewrote the entire power dynamic of our lives. If you've ever had to set a hard boundary with family to save your own life, tell me your story in the comments. Don't forget to share this video. It might be the exact sign someone needs to finally stand up for themselves.